We are just days away from the CNN presidential debate, and it should probably concern every American that our current president and leader of the free world needs a week of seclusion to prepare to stand and speak for an hour and a half. The bar for Joe is lower than the kiddie stairs he uses to board Air Force One. But I've got Democrat Patrick Murphy up next with his best attempt to defend and spin that one and more. The show starts now. Joseph Robinette Biden has been campaigning for political office since 1970. That's roughly twice as many years as I've even been alive. So it's rather distressing that he'd have to take an entire week off to prepare for a 90-minute debate. According to reports, while at Camp David for his CNN presidential debate prep, he'll be joined by at least 16 advisors to just help him along. Again, let's just take that in for another moment here. I get that preparing for a presidential debate is no small task, but the fact that a sitting president needs an entire week of sequestered and designated prep time with more than a dozen people tells me he's not just incapable of making it through the campaign season, but also incapable of serving as the damn commander-in-chief in the current term. That's how I see it, but I have a feeling my guest today won't agree, at least publicly, but we shall see. Joining me now is former Democrat Pennsylvania Congressman Patrick Murphy. All right, Patrick, try to defend that. He needs an entire week. I'm sure you're going to tell me that that's normal.
Listen, I haven't done the research on how long people take off for the debates, but I will tell you this, that when Barack Obama was running for his reelection and for his second term, he debated Mitt Romney, and Mitt Romney took it to him. And Barack Obama has said that he was somewhat flat-footed. You know, you're surrounded by the West Wing, you're surrounded by Air Force One, by the pomp and circumstances. You're not used to getting punches thrown at you when you're sitting president of the United States. So I think Joe Biden, frankly, he's doing his due diligence. He's listened to his former partner, Barack Obama, and he's going to be ready for Thursday night. It's going to be an epic rematch. You know that, Tommy.
I don't know if epic is the term I would use because the bar is so low for Joe. And I and others on the Trump side and the Republican side have said that that's a mistake to set the bar so low for Joe, because if he clears a low bar, it will seem like a victory. And I quite honestly think that whether I like Joe Biden or not, I think that we should set the bar a little higher for a sitting president and the leader of the free world. I don't think it should just be a matter of can you stand, can you speak for an hour and a half. I think it should be you are an elected leader. You are the president of the United States. You should have to perform to a certain level and defend your record. But I still do think that an entire week off at Camp David seems like a little much for me. But if you were preparing, if you were one of those 16 people in that cocoon kind of caring for Joe this week, what would you advise him? How would you guide him? What would you say to him to get him pumped up for Thursday?
Yeah, well, listen, I help veteran candidates across the country run because, you know, we had the least amount of veterans serving in Congress and federal government in basically the 21st century. So what I tell the veterans is what I would tell the president. Everybody wants to focus on why the other person should be fired. And I get it. That's part of the equation. But you also got to talk, Tommy, about why you should be hired. What is your vision for America? What is your vision to make sure that we're driving the economy for everyone? And, you know, obviously run on a record, but it's going to be a contrast. I mean, there's no doubt that when you look at the American people have been put through the absolute ringer. We had a global pandemic, 1 million Americans were killed. Unemployment was up at 16% in the Black community, and now it's at a historic low. Stock market at a historic high. Energy production, obviously the most historic energy being produced in American history in oil and natural gas. That's a positive thing. But we have a lot more work to do because as it relates to the American people, you know, I got gas this morning. It was $3.26. You know, 3 years ago or 2 years ago, it was like $5, right? Now it's going down, but it has to go down even lower to make sure the American people are getting taken care of.
Yeah, well, Joe Biden has done everything in his power to hamper American energy. So the fact that it's still, you know, plugging along despite Joe and the end fossil fuels camp. And let's also be honest about gas prices.
Tommy, can I interrupt you real quick? Because this is really quick. I'm not being respectful.
All right, give me some talking points, Patrick. Let's hear it.
I want you to look at the Willow Project. It's called the Willow Project. That was on Fox News when this came out. Joe Biden basically stood against the left of the Democratic Party to open up about 500,000 barrels of reserve in Alaska. It's called the Willow Project to produce more oil in America. You cannot stop the fact that there are more oil is being produced right now in America, oil and natural gas, than in the world history. And yes, gas prices went high, but let's call for what it is. Gas prices are high all over the world. Why? Because the top 3 energy producers in the world, I teach this at work, the top USA, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. Well, Russia isn't producing as much oil. Why? Because they invaded illegally Ukraine. So gas prices went up, and obviously we know, everyone's hurting, but we got to make sure that we produce energy here in America to keep it cheap here in America, to make sure we keep the jobs here in America.
Yeah.
And yes, we should invest in alternative energy and solar panels, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're powering American homes, American businesses, and we need number one in the military, not just with our economy, but our military as well.
So powering American homes and businesses with fossil fuels, Patrick, would you say that that's probably the safest bet to bring American energy independence roaring back is through fossil fuels, as you mentioned, natural gas, but also maybe the Keystone XL pipeline that your president shut down with hours into office? Do you think maybe he should give that one a second look-see?
I think there's a lot of folks. I know Senator Casey, the Democratic senator in Pennsylvania, and Senator Fetterman have been very upset about that stopping, because we had a deal in Pennsylvania and Southeast Pennsylvania to really put this pipeline in there in Delaware County. And it was a job creator, and labor unions were for it. So I think it's going to be revisited, to be honest with you. We'll see. It's not going to be revisited before November, but I do think that's an issue that people talk about here in Pennsylvania and elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, Joe Biden really needs to win Pennsylvania. So an about face on the whole natural gas discussion and coal and fossil
Tommy,
fuels.
I know if he about faces it, you're going to get your Biden 2024 sticker on your lapel there. You're going to be good to go. Not they have a lapel on, but you know what I mean. Like,
yeah.
And listen, I'm just being playful, but
yeah. Well, we know that we know that Joe Biden views climate change as our biggest threat. So I'm not going to hold my breath. But you and I could debate the issues all day. I do want to talk about the CNN presidential debate, because I'm really curious your take on a lot of things. But I'm also curious what you thought of yesterday, and it's been obviously a clip that's been viral circulating of CNN booting off a Trump surrogate, Caroline Leavitt, when she talked about and brought up one of the co-moderators, Jake Tapper, and his record of bashing Donald Trump. I want to play the clip for those who haven't seen it yet of what went down yesterday, and then I want to get your take on the other side if you thought it was appropriate. Let's take a listen.
It takes someone 5 minutes to Google Jake Tapper, Donald Trump, to see that Jake Tapper has consistently, frequently likened President Trump to Adolf Hitler.
Ma'am, I'm going to stop this interview if you continue to attack my colleagues. I would like to talk about Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who you work for.
Yes.
If you are here to speak on his behalf, I am willing to have this conversation.
I am stating facts that your colleagues have stated in the past.
Okay.
Now,
I'm sorry, guys. We're going to come back out to the panel. Caroline, thank you very much for your time. You are welcome to come back at any point. She is welcome to come back and speak about Donald Trump, and Donald Trump will have equal time to Joe Biden when they both join us now at later this week in Atlanta for this debate.
Dang, she was pretty flustered there. She didn't want anybody bringing up Jake Tapper's record of him on that air bashing Donald Trump and comparing him to Adolf Hitler. Do you think it was appropriate for her to boot Caroline Leavitt off at that point?
Well, I give Casey Hunt actually a lot of credit. She's a Pennsylvania gal, and this is why, because what you're seeing out there, both sides are doing this, by the way. They're trying to get the focus off Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And that's what Thursday night's about. It's not about Tyler Cherry. It's not about Ronnie Jackson. It's not about Jake Tapper, Dana Bash, who are journalists first. They're not commentators. They're journalists. And I do think they've been fair. And I think Casey's, in the military, we say, I served in the Army for a long time. Loyalty above all else except honor. And she was there saying, hey, listen, you can come on, but don't be bashing my colleagues that are about to go in this debate.
But Patrick, is it bashing to say, listen, Jake Tapper on your air has compared Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler? All right. I don't necessarily think that that's bashing him by bringing up a very fair point. Jake Tapper did that. It wasn't on secret recorded video. It was on their own network. comparing Donald Trump, who he's co-moderating a debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and you've got Jake Tapper, who has compared one of those candidates to Adolf Hitler. You don't think it's fair to maybe kind of bring that up and push CNN to answer for that?
Well, listen, I didn't hear that statement by Jake Tapper, and Tommy, I take your word for it, so I'm not questioning that, right? But I am questioning the fact that he's not spending all his days on CNN bashing Donald Trump, calling him a Nazi, right? I mean, that's not happening.
Do they do anything else
and Donald
on
Trump,
CNN?
but former President Trump agreed to the debate and agreed to go on CNN, and then the next one is, I think, CBS. I mean, he agreed to it, right? It's not like you or I forced him to do this.
No, he had to, because he's got to take on Joe Biden. And obviously Joe Biden is going to set the parameters because Joe needs that. He needs to lean on Jake Tapper and Dana Bash and CNN. But I ask you this, do you think that there's any possibility that Joe Biden or whoever controls Joe Biden, whoever his visiting angel is today or tomorrow, do you think they would ever agree to a Fox News debate co-moderated by Sean Hannity and Dana Perino? Do you think Joe Biden would ever take that on?
Or MSNBC on the other side, right? Listen, no, I don't think they would, to be honest with you, right? And I do think that I think that's part of the problem is that most Americans, frankly, they're getting their news from one source just to reinforce their own political beliefs, right? And I teach whether I was teaching at West Point or Wharton now. I tell people you have to have intellectual humility. You have to say, I don't have all the answers, right? Listen, I served the military. I taught at West Point, did some great things. I, owned 63 veteran-owned companies. And the reality of it is I'm learning every day. I'm reading every day, right? So I do think people need to think critically, need to say, hey, listen, I might be an R, but is this really the right way to go? Or I might be a D, same thing. I always vote my conscience. Tommy, I was an independent most of my life. I voted for George Bush the first time, right? And I served in Iraq. I lost 19 of my brothers. The reality of it is most folks in Washington have been there for too long. They've been there decade after decade after decade, right?
Well, Joe Biden
they
included,
love power,
right?
So, I think that's his political public service. But I'd also say there's other folks like Mitch McConnell and others, and I'm not trying to bash, the Senate leader and the Republicans. I'm not here to do that.
But
I am
Mitch
here
McConnell
to say
is stepping down as
he's stepping down as the leader, but he's staying in the Senate, right?
Yeah, but Joe Biden's running for office and he can barely stand it. And he wants to be president for 4 more years. Patrick, come on.
Tommy, come on.
I want to ask you something, and I want you to be just as honest as you possibly can. I know you got to carry water for the Democrats. I understand
I don't work for the Democrats. Tommy, I don't actually.
I know, but I know that's your side.
I'm not employed.
I get it. No. I get it. But I have to ask you to be very honest. If you had to pick, as somebody who is a Democrat, was Joe Biden your pick? Were you happy that he decided to run again?
I was for Pete Buttigieg in a primary 4 years ago. Flat out, I was in New Hampshire for him. I was in Iowa for him. No, I mean, listen, he's a veteran. You can now bash Pete Buttigieg, right? But that's who I was for. You're asking me the question.
You would have preferred that Pete Buttigieg be your candidate for 2024?
That's who it was in 2020. And I think that Joe Biden and the rest of America were dealt a bad hand. I'm not all blaming it on Donald Trump at all. We went through COVID. We went through the worst global pandemic we've had in generations. I will say this. You cannot deny the facts that Joe Biden has worked with a divided government in the House of Representatives that's controlled by Republicans and passed bipartisan infrastructure bill, passed the bipartisan CHIPS Act.
I know you're going to go back to that, Patrick, but I just asked you a question. Is Joe your guy? Are you happy that he is your nominee? You're happy that he's your nominee? Yeah,
I am happy that he's my nominee. Absolutely.
You're lying to me. You're lying to me.
Tommy, first of all, I was in 1987 Ultimate of the Year. I go to Catholic Church. I'm not going to confession after the Senate.
Then you're lying to yourself, Patrick. You've convinced yourself. You're like, yeah. Joe's our guy. Okay, well, I have to ask you this as well then. So what I'm confused about is, unlike you, the rest of your party doesn't want Joe. They think he's too old. Something like 2/3 of the Democrat Party doesn't want Joe. They think he's too old for whatever reason. So your own party doesn't want him. But you have to help me figure this out. Because when I hear others, Carville and others, talk about how they don't want Joe and they wish it was somebody else, and there's been a number of them, high-profile Democrats, that don't want Joe. But when they talk about who they would prefer, maybe I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, none of them have said Kamala Harris. And I'm confused by this, because to me, if the Democrat Party didn't want Joe and they were looking for a way to get out of Joe land, they would say, listen, Kamala Harris, first black woman, just let her do it, step aside, let Kamala take the reins. But I really, when Democrats bring up who they'd rather, they don't say Kamala Harris. They say Gavin Newsom, they say Whitmer, they say Shapiro, they say maybe Buttigieg. But I have yet to hear any Democrat say Kamala Harris is the one. Why is that?
Because the people who are saying that we need someone else, or that it's not going to be Joe Biden at this convention, all this kabuki dance that I hear from some Democrats that are, frankly, some of them are professional bedwetters, and it annoys the hell out of me, right? The reality is Joe Biden's going to get the nomination in Chicago at the convention, and it's going to be Biden-Harris, and that's what it is. I think there are people that are looking at, okay, well, if he wins, he's going to be term limited. Where is it? 4 years. And I do think that we have a deep bench. I will say, Tommy, that on the other side, we just had our Pennsylvania primary the other day, 17% voted for Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley hasn't been in a race against Donald Trump in months, 17%. And that's Pennsylvania. It's double digits in other states as well. So your side isn't unified around your nominee either. I think there's a lot of folks that are looking.
I don't know about that. I mean, it was pretty decisive on the Republican side. The primary process was pretty decisive on the Republican side.
I would disagree with you. There are a lot of folks who, after January 6th, that are Republicans that have said they're walking away from the former president because of the insurrection that happened, where you had 140 cops that were injured.
I know you guys got to talk about January 6th, but I want to ask you this, Patrick. I want you to be honest. You're in Pennsylvania. It's a state that's got high crime. It's a state that obviously energy is important. You've got a guy that names climate change as the #1 threat in Pennsylvania. And talking to the people that you talk to and the average everyday folks out there on the left and the right, just average blue collar Americans, do you think that they wake up every day and cry about January 6th and democracy? Is that priority one for them? Honestly.
I think the 5 cops that took their own life after January 6th that served there, that were attacked by their own citizens, their citizens that they took no support and defend, I do think their families cry. And I think that
but do you think the average American, when they look at I think that a lot of the Americans that have to sit through BLM riots for an entire summer and people that actually died there, I think their families care too. But I still think that your average American on the left and the right, when they wake up every day, and regardless of who you want to put the blame on for all this stuff, I just don't feel like most Americans have the luxury of waking up and crying about January 6th every day. I feel like they're more worried about paying the bills.
And I would agree with you. And they're able to pay the bills more. Why? Because we have record low unemployment. We have record high stock market. We have record high oil production. We have inflation now from 9% down to 3%. And we got to do better. But the reality of it is, Tommy, is that people want to make sure that we put the country first. And they're tired of the partisan politics. They're tired of folks bashing the other side. And I will tell you that there is a new generation of folks, veterans specifically, that are out there, governors of states, people like Josh Shapiro, Wes Moore, who are new generation of leaders who are moving the ball forward and getting a lot of attention, not just from Democrats, by the way, Tommy, from Republicans, and most importantly, independents that are tired of the status quo.
Yeah, you guys wish that they were your nominee. I mean, if you're honest, you wish that that they were your nominee.
I'm
you don't want to have. You don't want to have to defend Joe Biden. I know it. You know it. We all know it. We all know that you don't want Joe Biden. And I think it's hilarious. I think the only person that wants Joe Biden is Jill Biden. I don't even think Joe Biden wants Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden's done. I think he wants to go in his cocoon and be left alone, be out to pasture. I think Jill Biden wants it more than anybody. But I'm never going to get you to admit that. So I just want to talk about another aspect of what's going on within that administration. Do you think that, given everything, do you think it was wise during all of this, while Joe's preparing for this debate and all this, everything going on, do you think it was wise to promote the gentleman named Tyler Cherry? Do you think that was a good move this week? The man who, whatever he wants to do in his off time, but has tweeted a lot of really controversial things, comparing police to slave patrols. He's seen wearing a mesh crop top with rose petal applique. Do you think that now was the time?
That's not a look I can pull off, frankly, Tommy. Listen, I'm a former All-American paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne Division. I couldn't pull that look off. But no, do I think Tyler Cherry, is it a great look? No, it's not, right? But I do think, though, it's entertainment. It's infotainment for folks. I think the reality of it is it's not about Tyler Cherry, and it's not about Ronnie Jackson calling for drug tests. It's about Donald Trump and Joe Biden in an epic rematch. 4 years ago, when President Trump was president, he debated Donald Trump. Donald Trump debated Joe Biden twice. Joe Biden from the gate said, all right, we're going to debate twice, right? That's a fair way to move forward. And I'm glad they're doing it early. I'm glad we're doing it in June and again in September, right? I'm glad we're not waiting until October.
So why do you think they're doing it in June? Do you think it's because they want to see if Joe can stay alive that long? And then if he can't, then they have to replace him? Do you think that's why it is?
You are hanging out with these professional bedwetters in the Democratic Party. Absolutely not. No, that is not why. Absolutely not. No.
Why? Why do a debate in June? Why do you think that was?
I think one of the reasons why, because we have early voting, right? So you do it in June, do it again in September. No, but I'm saying you set the table and you set the tone. And I will say, I mean, listen, you and I have been on the couch on Outnumbered on Fox News, and I really appreciate your perspective, what you say. But, you know, going into the State of the Union, people were like, oh, is he going to be able to do it? He was up there for 90 minutes. Joe Biden,
he was up there. He was on something, which is why I want to ask you. I know that you guys. Let's be honest. Do you think it's fair to say if you're on something, we should know what it is? Do you think that, I understand that you're going to say, oh, you know, the Ronnie Jackson, the drug test, but do you think it would be fair for the American people to know if Joe Biden had to be on something to perform? Do you think that the American people should know what that is? And if Donald Trump had to be on something, vice versa?
I think I would like to know as an American if either candidate was under influence of drugs, but I don't think that's the case. And Tommy,
you really don't. You think it's normal to stand there with your eyes bulging like that?
Can I just say, do you remember when George Bush? I mean, I know I'm a little older than you, right? But like when George Bush was running for president and he was debating Al Gore, and they were attacking him, saying he had a microphone pack in the back of his back, and it was like complete BS because the jacket wrinkled up a certain way. I mean, there's people on both sides that want to get wrapped around the axle on this stuff. I mean, come on, it's going to be an epic rematch this Thursday night. I'm actually at the airport right now doing this interview because I'm on my way to Georgia. It's going to be a hell of a debate Thursday night, and I think that's going to be very important, and it's going to set a contrast.
So if Joe does poorly, and when I say poorly, I mean he has a major gaffe. He talks about his uncle being eaten by cannibals, or he says he knew Putin when Putin was in the KGB.
Or drinking Clorox.
Actually, you're not going to go there. You're not going to go there because that has been.
I was being playful.
You know, Donald Trump didn't say that. And Snopes actually, it took him 7 summers, but Snopes actually comes out and says all that Charlottesville BS was BS, and that's not actually what Donald Trump said. That's the whole premise that Joe said he was running on. So we don't want to get into debunked claims here. But if Joe has a major gaffe on Thursday night and he appears to buffer, do you think it's time for the Democrats to pull the ripcord?
One, I don't think it's going to happen. Two, it's not going to happen, number one. Number two, you know, I turn back to you. What happens if Donald Trump does the same thing? Are you going to say it should be J.D. Vance? It should be Nikki Haley? It's like, come on. They're both professionals. They both were presidents of the United States.
One of them has a history of doing that, and one of them doesn't. I know you're going to say, oh, Trump talks about electrocuting sharks and all that stuff. When he's making jokes about those things, that's quite different from just making up tall tales or saying something, not remembering who your DHS secretary was. That was just last week. Reading off the prompter, you know, end quote. I mean, repeat line. That's not.
Tommy, Donald Trump just said that he beat a couple months ago. He said that he beat Barack Obama, which he didn't.
Having a slip of the tongue every once in a while and referring to the wrong person at the wrong time is a little different than saying the humma of America.
Tommy, I know. But can I say one other thing? You and I both, and I want to speak for you, right? But I'm a devout Catholic, right? And the Bible teaches me to show grace, right? As a Christian, like to show grace to others. They're both all. I mean, and honestly, you look at my Twitter feed at Patrick Murphy PA, my Instagram, all that stuff. When Donald Trump was president for 4 years, I wasn't there bashing. He was the president of the United States. He was my president. I didn't vote for him, but I closed ranks around him because I want America to win. Mm-hmm. I want my kids to have a better future than I had, right? I have a daughter who's 17 and a son that's 14. It's about Maggie and Jack Murphy, my world, right? And I think that's how most Americans feel. I know that's how you feel about putting the country first, right? And so no matter what happens on November 5th, and listen, I hope Joe Biden wins. I know you beg to differ, right? But I do hope as Americans we can come together and think, okay, listen. And by the way, I think it's going to be a divided government. I mean, I think Joe Biden's going to pull off a nail biter, and he won the 6 swing states. I don't think he's going to win all 6 swing swing states again. I think Arizona doesn't look good. Nevada's not looking good. Georgia doesn't look good, right? But I do think Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, for Biden, I think he can maintain that. And then if he does, he'll win. And if everything else plays out, how it did in the past. But I will say this. I do think that the Democrats will take back the House. I do think the Republicans will take back the Senate. So again, we're going to have divided government. And the reality of it is when we have divided government, the stock market goes higher, the economy goes higher. Why? Because there's clarity to say, well, there's going to be checks and balances again, and continued checks and balances like we have right now. And that's why I do say we should highlight when we have bipartisan movement. And we don't talk about that enough. And again, I get it. If it bleeds, it leads. But you can't deny the fact that the Republicans in Congress have partnered with Joe Biden on the infrastructure bill.
Yeah, infrastructure. I don't think
57
bills. Yeah, infrastructure. Yeah. I know that you guys repeat the infrastructure all the time. But the last thing
but that's 57,000 projects that put people back to work.
Yeah,
the
there's nothing wrong with
where
that.
we manufacture these chips so that we're not relying on China. That's a national security issue. I was just in Columbus, Ohio, talking about this and looking at major.
To talk about national security issues with everything going on at our southern border is kind of rich. Well, that's the last thing I do want to ask you about. Do you think illegal aliens should be given the right to vote?
No, I do not.
So you don't think that they should be given a pathway to citizenship and then be given amnesty and voting rights?
No, I don't think illegal immigrants should be able to vote in American elections. Absolutely not. No.
Ever.
And I think most Americans would. Tommy, listen, I love you. I don't know, I don't know if you're drinking a haterade there or what, but
I just want to know because some Democrats want non-citizens to be voting. So I want to know from your perspective, not speaking for your party, but you personally, do you think that illegal aliens should be given a pathway to citizenship and a right to vote if they came into this country illegally by the millions under Joe Biden?
Right. Absolutely not a right to vote. I do think that there are people in America that have been here for 10 years that married an American citizen, that have kids. There should be some type of way that they can earn their citizenship. I will tell you this, and Tommy, I know we don't talk about this in America, but this is what kind of bothers me because I was one of the poorest members of Congress when I ran. I was in the Army for a long time. I'm still paying my college loans off. I have a mortgage, all that stuff, right? But when I hear people just talk about immigrants, and not you, right? I'm not saying you, but other people. I say, remember what happened to the Francis Scott Key Bridge a few months ago down in Baltimore and Maryland, where there were 6 immigrants that were killed at 1:30 in the morning. They were filling potholes. They're jobs that Americans don't want. They were now. I don't know if they were illegal, undocumented. I don't know. I do know they were from, I believe, Honduras, and they all gave their life on their job site, working, filling potholes. Right? There's people out there cutting grass, housekeeping houses. Right? So for those people that are hardworking people that are willing to say, "I'll pay my taxes. I want to earn American citizenship," we should give them a path. And I will say one last thing as an example. When I served in Iraq and evasion, in my brigade combat team, the 2nd Brigade Combat Team with the 82nd Airborne Division, we lost 19 American paratroopers over there. One of them actually was not an American citizen. He had his green card. He joined the Army. He was earning his citizenship. He was much of an American as anyone else that I've met. And so I do think we all as Americans got to step back and say, after November 5th, because nothing's going to happen, we know that, right? But we should say, hey, listen, what is the fair thing to do here? Let's secure the border, number one, and let's figure out a way to move the ball forward, make people earn their citizenship if they're here in America and they're doing it the right way and above board.
Okay. Well, we can agree on that, the above board thing. And we can also agree that the border needs to be secure. So we'll end it on those two great high points. And of course, I thank you for your service and your dedication to this country. I know that you love this country. I know you're a patriotic American. I also know you don't want Joe Biden to be your candidate, but we'll just leave it at that. We'll leave it. I will take your word for it. Even though I don't believe you, I'll take your word for it. And listen, we'll all be watching on Thursday night for that CNN presidential debate. And I hope the American people get something out of it one way or another. And I thank you for your time and safe travels to you, because I know you're going to Georgia. So safe travels to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Tommy. I'm going to Fort Eisenhower, by the way, Georgia. It used to be called Fort Gordon. PT with troops and being with troops, helping them transition out with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. But appreciate what you do. Appreciate seeing you at Fox and obviously this great show, Outkick. And hopefully I'll see you soon.
Well,
God bless, Tommy.
Thank you for all that you do, especially for our veterans and for our military. That is something that's unifying. Both parties want that for our veterans. So God bless you for that. Right. Safe travels, and thanks for all you do.
All right. Thanks, Tommy.
All right. Folks, illegal aliens led in by Joe Biden continue to rape and murder American women as the left scrambles to run cover, and I have some final thoughts. With the 2-year anniversary of the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade, you've heard and you're going to hear Democrats squawking a lot about abortion and women's rights, but you're not going to hear much of anything about the slew of young American women being targeted, stalked, raped, strangled, and murdered by the illegal aliens Democrats have welcomed across our wide-open southern border. In fact, quite the opposite. Instead, you'll hear Democrats and Biden surrogates either laughing about it or worse, shielding the illegal alien rapists themselves.
What do you tell the parents of those people, those young girls who were killed? This is absurdity. The preponderance of these people, Michael, are male.
But what is the difference between an illegal immigrant who unfortunately engages in that activity?
And we don't like that. I want to be clear. We don't use the term illegal. So
we don't.
Undocumented individuals.
That's sweet. They're illegal aliens.
Undocumented individuals versus anyone else who commits the same crime.
Let me show you this is one of the reasons that people have these sort of thinking. Here's the three cable networks reporting of this. Our banner said, soon Biden announces legal protections for undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens. CNN's banner said, Biden announces new protections for some undocumented spouses. Here was Fox's banner, migrant arrested for raping 13-year-old New York City.
Yes.
And so I think that's part of the problem, right?
Exactly.
Is that you have
That's
a lot of fear-mongering.
Exactly.
None of this is funny, and every single one of these rapes and murders were avoidable, and that's just a fact. And that's a big part of the reason Democrats have to downplay it, avoid the subject, avoid the names of the young women raped or killed. They can't explain it away or blame it on Trump, so they try to just work around it. But if they were honest, I'd give them more credit. See, if they were honest, they'd just come out and say it. They view the Americans raped or murdered by illegal aliens as acceptable loss. They are willing to accept you and I as collateral damage in their scheme to get future voters, pad the census, and increase their representation in Congress. Democrats are fine with bankrupting cities, even their own, over this. They're willing to gloss over the national security risks this little experiment poses. They're willing to sit idly by as their illegal aliens stalk, rape, and murder the most vulnerable among us, even fellow illegal aliens, if it gets them a fast and reliable track to everlasting power. And ain't that sick? The people who represent you are willing to roll the dice with your life and the lives of your fellow Americans, particularly young, vulnerable girls, and all for power. So the next time Kamala Harris or one of their slimy surrogates starts huffing on about women's rights or my body, my choice, you remind them of the young American women who had their choices, their freedom, their very lives ripped away from them at the hands of the illegal aliens Democrats have let in. Those are my final thoughts. Please be sure to tune in tomorrow live again at 1 p.m. Eastern. Also, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. From Nashville, God bless and take care. What's up, guys? Thank you for watching Tomi Lahren is Fearless. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you'll never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.